Hello, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be talking about solving quadratic equations using the quadratic formula. The quadratic formula is a formula that we can use to solve any quadratic equation. Now I know you might be like, Ms. Zarnecki, why didn't you just teach us this from the beginning? And the answer is sometimes factoring is easier, sometimes graphing is easier. It kind of depends on what you prefer. So I'm going to show you how to use the quadratic formula. The quadratic formula here is an equation that you get as a result of solving for x from the standard form of a quadratic equation. So just to remind us, standard form of a quadratic equation, y equals ax squared plus bx plus c. So the first step is the equation in standard form. The equation that I'm going to use today for the example is 3x squared plus 2x equals 8. Now, as you can see, this is not set equal to 0. So I'm going to rewrite it so that it is set equal to 0. I chose this one just to make sure that you understood it's pretty simple to do that. The only thing, I have a positive 8. So to move a positive 8, I'm going to use subtraction. So then I end up with 3x squared plus 2x minus 8 equals 0. Now I have my standard form. My equation is set equal to 0 because, again, when you're solving quadratic equations, you're trying to find the value of x when y is 0 for the function. All right, now I'm going to identify my a, b, and c terms. For this function, my a is 3. My b is 2, and my c is negative 8. Remember, when you're identifying those values, the sign in front or of the number sticks with it. Then what we do is we substitute these values into the quadratic formula. So it'll be the opposite of b, always using parentheses, plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c. And that's all going to be divided by 2 times a. Alright, now we're going to go through and simplify. So first, do I have any double negative signs? I do not. Not until I get in here when I'm simplifying my discriminant. So I'm going to come over here and simplify. So negative 2 plus or minus the square root. 2 squared is 4 minus 4 times 3 is 12. 12 times 8 is 96, but it's negative. So a negative 96, all divided by 2 times a, which is 3. Alright, so now I'll simplify that. Negative 2 plus or minus, that's how we read that. The square root of 4 minus negative 96 is actually 4 plus 96. So that becomes 100 divided by 6. Okay. Now my next step down here, I'm going to simplify my root. Now because 100, we got lucky this time, 100 is a perfect square. So I can go ahead and simplify that. So negative 2 plus or minus the square root of 100 divided by 6 is going to equal negative 2 plus or minus 10 divided by 6. We'll do another example later where the value under the radical is not a perfect square, and I'll show you how to simplify that as well. Alright, now we're going to take this and we're going to split it into two versions. The first one, negative 2, will be plus 10 divided by 6. The other version will be negative 2 minus 10 divided by 6. The reason why we end up with a plus and a minus, and why there's a plus and a minus in our equation. If I take a positive 10 and I square it, positive 10 times positive 10 equals 100. However, if I take a negative 10 and square it, so negative 10 times negative 10, that is also 100. So that is why we end up with two values here. Then I'll go ahead and simplify. Negative 2 plus 10 is 8. 8 divided by 6, that would be a decimal. So I'm going to leave it an improper fraction, but just simplify it down to 4/3. On the right, negative 2 minus 10 is negative 12. Negative 12 divided by 6 is negative 2. So my final answer, x equals 4/3, x equals negative 2. To check these, you could substitute them back into the equation and then simplify. And then you would see that it would give you a value of 0. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and do another example on the back. The example I'm going to do here, x squared minus 6x minus 2 equals 0. So we're going to follow that same pattern. Is it set equal to 0? Yes. Good. So that was my first step. Set equal to 0. Second step, identify the a, b, and c values. My a value here, if there's no coefficient, it's a 1. My b value here is a negative 6. And my c value is negative 2. Next step, I'm going to substitute into the quadratic formula. Which was again x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all divided by 2a. I'm going to substitute that in. So x is equal to the opposite of my b value plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c, all divided by 2 times a. Now I simplify. So the opposite of negative 6 is a positive 6 plus or minus the square root. Because my negative sign is inside the parentheses, this is negative 6 times negative 6, which will give me a positive 36 minus 4 times 1 is 4 times a negative 2 is a negative 8, all divided by 2 times 1, which is 2. Keep going. So 6 plus or minus the square root of 36 plus 8, all divided by 2. 6 plus or minus the square root of 44, all divided by 2. Now, you can see that 44 is not a perfect square. So I can't simplify that radical. I can't totally get rid of my square root sign. However, 44 is the product of 4 and 11. So I can do 6 plus or minus the square root of 4 times 11 over 2. When I do that, I can take out the square root of 4 and the square root of 2. So 6 plus or minus the square root of 4, square root of 11, 2. I can simplify further. 6 plus or minus 2 root 11 divided by 2. Now I can split into my two steps. So 6 plus 2 root 11 divided by 2. 6 minus 2 root 11 divided by 2. So you can, if you want, go a little bit further. Okay. And because the 6 and the 2 are both divisible by 2, I can factor that value out and get 3 plus the square root of 11, or approximately 6 3/10. I did that 3 plus square root of 11 on my calculator. And I can show you here, before we do the second one, if I put this value in, so using parentheses, 6 plus 2, and then to get the square root, because it's in blue, I'm going to use the blue key, square root of 11. Now what we have to do, I don't want to be in the square root sign anymore, so hit my arrow button, close the parentheses, divide that by 2. You see I get approximately 6 3/10. Now, if I do 3 plus the square root of 11, I get the same value. If the 2 or the 6 was not divisible by 2, I would not have been able to simplify that further. Sometimes you can't. Sometimes you have to leave it as an improper fraction. Then over here, I would end up with 3 minus the square root of 11, or approximately 3/10. So my answer is that x equals approximately 6 3/10, and x equals approximately 0 3/10, or x equals 3 plus root 11, 3 minus root 11. I hope this helps you understand using the quadratic formula. If you have any questions, please post them in the comments below. Have a wonderful day.